When we first became a step family, just like you, we didn't quite know what we were getting into.
Scarlett and Randall Tandy here from Enjoying Your Blended Family, and we have been a blended family for over 15 years. And not only did we have to figure out how to handle the day-to-day struggles that come with being in a step family, about 7 years in, our biggest fear happened and each of our kids went to go live with their other parent.
We went through seasons of zero connection with each one of our kids, and we had to get really creative on ways to reestablish and reconnect those relationships.
And through prayer and becoming very intentional, God restored our family in true God-like fashion and made it better than we could have ever imagined or hoped for.
So God has called us to help other families do the same thing, to make those connections. So if you're looking for stronger relationships, deeper connections, and more communication, then we believe it truly starts with being intentional and creating these fun opportunities in our family.
Click the link so that you can get quick access to the process that we use to help you find common interests in your family so that you can be more intentional on spending time with your kids, your spouse, and your family as a whole.
We believe you can take the step out of step family and create a blended family that you truly enjoy.
You can find our podcast on Enjoying Your Blended Family on YouTube or anywhere that you listen to podcasts. And while you're sitting there, go ahead and follow us on social media.
So when you have more fun, you'll see less problems.
What is up, BFAM? Man, it has been a quick minute since we have recorded the last podcast. Just to give you just a little bit of like, hey, where the heck has the Tandys been, or specifically me, because I've been the one leading this here lately. We had a hurricane here a few weeks ago in South Texas, and that took out electricity and just your Wi-Fi. Of course, all of that works on electricity, but even once we got electricity back, a lot of people didn't have computers. And then just the life stressors that come when you have a natural disaster. And so trying to get back into the normal after that. And then I went into a couple weeks of being sick. And I thought, you know what? Instead of stressing myself out, trying to figure out how to make a podcast in the middle of all this, I'm just going to take the time that I need to rest and relax and then come back on fresh. So with that happening, though, the exciting thing is, you guys have been showing up on the podcast and listening to the last episodes. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Everybody's getting this last episode in that we did. And if that is you, like, thank you for showing up and you know what we're talking about today. If that's not you, we have been talking about loving him well. It's a Gary Thomas book that is about us as the wives having this focus on being the best wives that we can and seeing our husband through the lens, pretty much like when you started dating him, that feeling that you had, the experience that you had with him. And then on the other side of that lens that God sees him, right? He's brought you two together for a reason, and we can get so focused on the negatives. And so that's what this chapter, this focus today that we're going to be talking about is going to be more on that. It's going to be on that, idea of us so easily looking at the negative instead of being able to pull out that positive. And then we're going to wrap it up by the end of it. I have Jamie here from Make It a Date. So she's hanging out in her car right now, mom life happening, running back and forth with her kids. And so she is our expert today. And I'll let her tell you a little bit intro into her story of why she's so passionate about helping couples be intentional in their relationships. But I have her on here because not because she does it all right all of the time, right? But because like many of us, the reason I'm even reading this book right now is because I'm like, I have put my marriage on the back burner and I know better and I need to do something different. So Jamie, tell us a little bit about your story of Make It a Date and how that came about and how you help couples now.
All right. Yeah. Make It a Date kind of blossomed 4 or 5 years ago. And, but before that, my parents divorced when I was 24. I'd been married about 7 years at this point, and it kind of hit me harder than I thought it would, realizing that marriages can split after being together for so long. And I kind of saw through a lens where I kind of saw my parents in a different lens where I felt like they just didn't do those little things that they did at the beginning of their marriage. And so, like you said, it's just easy to put it on the back burner, and then they slowly drifted apart. And I kind of took that experience and was like, I don't want that for my marriage. And so I'm going to try to do a little bit better. And I found to do a little bit better for me was through date night. And my husband and I were able to get in the habit of date night, and it really just helped us connect and have our home life be better. And it lessened our tension too. When we feel something, we just kind of let it out now instead of letting it build and build. Anyway, so I just share a bunch of date ideas for couples all over who want just simple connection. It doesn't have to be complicated. I know we're all in the thick of life, and that's how it is, but you can still find time to make it a date with your spouse. And that's what I want to help couples do, is find that time.
Yeah, and you said it like perfectly about like letting the tension out, because that's where Randall and I all the time, we find ourselves in the same place. And I think if both of us were sitting in the room, he would agree with me. More so him towards me, I think, because just of our personalities, the way that works. And I tend to have, and when I'm comparing myself to other people, like married couples, I tend to have like more of the man's personality, and I like the scatterbrain kind of like whatever, instead of like how the woman usually like has to have things a certain way, and like, you know, everything has a place and all this stuff. So I empathize with a lot of husbands, but when we don't spend that time together, it's like it's like everything that I do starts to get on his nerves.
Yeah.
And then because I'm getting on his nerves and I'm such a people pleaser, now I'm like running myself ragged, trying to keep him happy and pleased all of the time. And then I'm getting frustrated with him that he's frustrated with me. And it finally takes us to a point where we're like, what is happening here? This isn't us. We know better. We know that this is what we're supposed to do. We know we're supposed to spend quality time together. Why are we not being intentional in this? And it's like, we're raising adult kids, and yet our house is full with our kids all the time and the grandbaby.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to find that time to just him and I have time to connect and be able to have these in-depth conversations. So I love what you do by helping people in that manner. And that's why when I came to this chapter, and this chapter today in the Loving Him Well is all about seeing your husband with those eyes, not focusing on the negative. And I'm going to give an example from the story here. But when I thought, like, I don't want to just talk about this chapter, I want to hear from someone who I know is very intentional in this area. Not that Jamie and Cameron, her husband, are just two perfect human beings. They are two people that love each other and that are willing to do the hard work that it takes. And then her husband works away a lot. So they have to be very intentional when it comes to their relationships and spending that quality time together. So if you're one of those people too, we've even done a podcast on here about that as well. Like Jamie is not a new guest. She's been on probably 3 times. Maybe this is her 4th time along this journey with us. And so I can link some of those other things in the show notes if you want to hear about some of the stuff. She's like, great. The thing that I love about her products and the things that she pushes out is it's the simplest things. It's these conversation starters that you can have with your spouse that really just get some in-depth things that you don't talk about. You don't just sit around and have these conversations. So are you ready to jump in, Jamie?
I'm ready. Let's
All
do
right.
it.
Okay. So in the beginning, in this chapter, in this book, it shares a couple stories. I'm not going to share the Bible story with you, but if you know the story of Elijah and the woman who didn't have any food to feed her child, she like lost her husband, and now her and her sons, they're like starving to death, and she has no way to feed them except this little bit of like flour and oil or something. And this prophet comes and he needs help with, or he asked her for the food, and she's like, this is all I have. And he's like, if you make me some bread, I promise, like basically it's going to work out for you. And she does what he asked, and she ends up having this bread that's just a continual, as she's pouring the oil out, she's able to continue to use it and make the bread. And as the story goes on, then eventually like her son ends up dying. And then I said I wasn't going to tell you the story here. I'm telling you the story. I'm giving you the brief version of the story. But her son ends up dying, and then the prophet ends up doing a miracle in this situation to bring him back alive. And she's like, okay, now I believe you. And he's like, are you kidding me? I have been providing your food for all of this time. And that was a miracle. And in the beginning, it was, you saw it as the miracle, is the purpose of this story. In the beginning, it was just that. It was this huge thing. Like she was going to die. She couldn't provide food for her kids. But as it continued each day that happened, she got used to it. It became the norm. And now what once was something that was life-giving is now something that she is taking for granted. And so along with that story, Jamie, here in a second, I want you to share with me if any of this is connecting you with you while I am sharing this story. But in the book, Gary goes on these like conferences, and he is talking to a group of people, and there's these women here at the conference, and one woman is like sharing about how fabulous her husband is at doing this yard work stuff. And this other woman's like, must be nice that your husband gets out and does the yard work, because my husband sat on the couch all weekend. And in that, like when Gary heard her saying this about her husband, he makes it, he's very intentional about going and speaking to the husband and talking about their weekend, not really like ratting her out or anything, but just kind of hearing how it went. And so then when he comes back to her and he's having these conversations, and he's asking her like, so yeah, you were comparing your spouse to him or whatever, and talking about must be nice. Like, so what do you do for a living? She's like, oh, I'm a stay-at-home mom. And he's like, oh, well, that's nice. Because like 60% of the women that would like to stay at home, like he's not doing like to be a smart aleck. He's just like kind of like bringing out the truth. Like 1 in 3 women that want to stay home get to, and the others don't. So that's very awesome. Like, and tell me about your house and this and that. And so long story cut short, she begins to realize the blessings that her husband is in her relationship, the things that he does do, that he took their son to play baseball that weekend and took their daughter out to do something special. Like, yes, he may not be out in the yard building a garden or whatever for her, but he's busting his butt Monday through Friday, working to put a roof on the head, so over her head, so that she can stay at home. So the concept today, what I want us to really focus on, that each of us is married to someone who has these gifts and abilities and skills and just blessing that they are in our marriage. And they also have that other side, right? They have these weaknesses and these things that we just wish could change. And we get to choose what we focus on. And when we focus and start to compare our spouse to other people's spouses, we start to take for granted the things that our husband is doing in our lives. So, Jamie, have you seen this to be true in y'all's relationship?
Yeah, for sure. I was just thinking that comparison is such an easy trap to get into. I think especially for women, because we're naturally observant. We like to observe all the things around us. And I get into that trap where it's like, there's our neighbors are outside playing catch with their sons, and Cameron's inside. Cameron is a couch husband. He loves TV. He loves movies. He just loves even sitting down and listening to his audiobook. Like, I listen to an audiobook and I'm cleaning the house, right? So like, even comparing between me and him, I get into that trap where I'm like, well, I do it this way and you do it this way. And I want to make my side right? Like, that's just, I want my side to be the better one. And so that's so true. And that happens a lot in our marriage where I'm like, well, another big comparison trap that has always been in our marriage is I'm a morning person and he's always been a night owl. And so my most productive hours are in the morning. And I've always just wanted him to be that morning person with me, where we get up and we do things together, and we, do devotional, or we do go on a walk, whatever it is together. And that just like hasn't happened. And I used to get so upset because for me it's so easy. It's so easy for me to wake up and do it. And I wasn't understanding that for him it's hard because he just has more productive hours in the afternoon and in the evening. And he like, and it's true. When I take a step back and look at it, he gets so much done in the hours that he's most productive. And I have learned to just be like, okay, we're still getting things done, and he's still doing these things. Anyway, those are just two examples, but it's so easy to get into the comparison trap with other couples, or even between the two of you, where you might do something that you feel is superior, and therefore you want it to be that way for them too. But you have to remember too, your differences is what made you come together in the first place. You loved something about him or her that really struck you as like, oh, I really love that quality. And now that it's become normal in your marriage because you've been so familiarized, it's now become a, like a little nuisance. Like, it's so annoying because it's not the strength that you saw at the beginning. Does that make sense?
Yes, and it's totally like that. And I think God knows that when he's pairing us up with our partner, right? I mean, I am grateful that Randall is not as like fly by the seat of my pants and scattered as I am. Like, if he jumped on every single whim that I had or every single idea, like, we would have nothing. And I am grateful that I am not like him, because I mean, our house would be like a drill sergeant kind of situation.
I
I
love
help
that.
make him more flexible, and like,
Yes.
between the two of us, we get things done because he has to hold me back and I have to push him forward. And
Yes.
if we were both him, nothing in that sense, like taking a risk and stuff, none of that would ever happen, because he's such a like more play it safe kind of person. And so
Yes.
I am grateful for those strengths, but it is like the longer you're in it, just like I was saying earlier, it's like the more you have it, the more you take for granted. Like, we just had the hurricane
Yes.
here, right? And man, those days without electricity was like, oh my gosh, like, this is horrible. The windows are up. It's so hot here in Texas. There's, the water's limited, the food's limited. You can't open the fridge because the food's going to go bad. Like, and then even just having internet access, like all these things that we don't like, we just like, we have them. We don't have to think about it. But when you don't have it, you're so appreciative. Like, I cannot wait till I can do this, this, and that, so the dishes can be washed like normal in the dishwasher and everything. But I'll tell you, as soon as that electricity came back, I closed those windows, closed the blinds, turned on that TV, turned on the air conditioning, and sat there. Woo! And then just got like right back into normal routine. And then it like hit me like, look how quick you went right back into taking all of these things that you were like, I will never take this for granted again. And you do. It's just very natural. And so our spouses have all of these great qualities in them that we are taking for granted every day. If you have a spouse that is going to work every day, you should be grateful. There are women out there whose spouses do not work. They just, for whatever reason, they can't or they don't. I was in a previous marriage that was like that. Like, our money didn't come in. If you're married to a spouse that's a tightwad, praise the Lord for that, because I was married to someone who spent every penny that came into our bank account. Like, you can see the positives and the negative in every single one of these qualities. And so we have to choose to look at those good things, and then not just look at them, but actually appreciate them. And so I want to talk to you about that today, Jamie, as we're wrapping up today and like giving some tips and pointers to anyone that's listening. What are some things that you do to be very intentional in that way of being grateful for your spouse, letting them know that you're grateful for them, and making sure that you're not taking them for granted?
I was, before we jumped on this podcast, I talked to Cameron. I was sitting there like trying to get all my thoughts out, and I would say the first thing for me is always ask, and to have, like, you were a reminder to me to ask him, because I think sometimes get into these assumptions too, where it's like, oh, you know, I do tell him thank you and I do all these things, but are you really? You know, it's like having like a little come to Jesus with yourself. And so I asked him, I was like, what are the things that make you feel appreciated and seen? And it's interesting because I did read chapters 4 to 7 in the book, and he talked about how a lot of men love the words of affirmation and the appreciation and the thank yous. And that was true for Cameron. He was like, it sounds so silly, but when you say thank you, it really does go a long way. And it makes me want to put more energy into that part of our relationship. And I will tell you, before, like Jamie 3 years ago, I was the wife that was like, I am not saying thank you for the things that he quote unquote is supposed to do. I was totally that wife, was like, no, like those are his duties and there should be no gratitude toward that. And that sounds so, like, me hearing that now is like, whoa, that's pretty harsh. Because when I think in our relationship, he's always so great to say thank you to me for like things that go unnoticed, right? Like being a stay-at-home mom, being the one that cleans and does his laundry. Like, he's typically great at saying thank you. And I take it like, yep, you betcha, you know, like I never gave that back to him. And I noticed that about 3 years ago in our marriage. And I actually had asked my dad, I said, hey, when you divorced mom, did you ever feel appreciated in your relationship? And he told me, his answer was something that changed the way I viewed my husband, because he said, you know, I just loved going to the places where I felt appreciated, and work was that place of where I felt the most appreciated for what I did. And I was like, man, I need to be better at making our home a place of appreciation for him. I do not want him to feel like he is not appreciated in his own home and in our relationship, because I think a lot of times women, we do feel the things, but for some reason we don't want to let it out because that's vulnerable, and we get to like open ourselves up for this emotional roller coaster of either like they'll accept it or they're gonna like laugh at you, you know. And sometimes it's really scary, but it really changed the way I looked and appreciated my husband. So I flipped it, and it was so hard for me to say thank you for taking the trash out. Oh my gosh, you guys. But I did it. And the craziest thing happened. He started doing things more. And 9 times out of 10, when I would say a genuine, like, hey, thanks so much for taking our kids to that birthday party. I wasn't able to, you know, get him there on time. I appreciate you jumping in and doing that. Most of the time he'll come back and say, oh, no problem. And thank you so much for some, you know, fill in the blank. It changed so quickly. And I want wives to know that your effort will make a difference. I know from experience that if you feel like if I just am the one that changes, he won't follow suit. I can guarantee that it will follow suit eventually. Like, you still have to put in that effort. It's still going to take that time of you consciously thinking of it, but he will follow suit, and you will feel so much gratitude in your relationship for your husband, and vice versa.
Yeah, we had so many different things as you're talking, just like coming to mind. For one, I think we think our husbands are such like a hard, like, because they're not as emotional, that they don't want or need that from us. And yes, that was like one of the huge points in the book that it was talking about, is that men feel like they appreciate their wives more than they feel like their spouse appreciates them. Like, one guy shares this story in there about like that he's like the shuttle guy. Like, I'm thinking about like we have the rodeo here, and you wait in the line for almost an hour, and then the shuttle finally shows up. Like, it don't even matter that you've been waiting an hour. When you see that shuttle and it's yours, like, you were so excited. You're like so grateful. Like, oh, I'm so glad you're here. And he was comparing that to like, I wish that's how my wife looked at me when I walked in. when I walked in that I got that same kind of like joy from her. And that part in the book really like spoke to me, like, because so often we're doing so many different tasks at the house and it's just like, oh, hey, whatever, or, you know, you're finishing up what you were doing on your phone or washing dishes, cooking, but to take that time to acknowledge them, like, I am so glad you're here. And Randall and I are in this like season right now where my car can't get inspected. Here in Texas, you have to have an inspection on your car and it won't pass. So I can't drive my car. And I was driving it still illegally until the Lord just really like put it on my heart. Like, I want you to be obedient in this. Randall doesn't think you should be driving it. It's illegal, and I want you to stop driving it. And I had been driving it for 5 months. It went out in January. So I was still driving it like that. And he's like, you just got to trust me. And I'm like, but that means I have to wake up and take him. Well, I already wake up early, but take him and drive him to work, then come back and then go pick him up. It's like an extra 2 hours added into my day. It's just like all this stuff. And so one thing that God was just really placing on my heart is like, right now, y'all are struggling for time. And this is going to give y'all time to come together, and you're forced to because you're in the car together, right? And so we've been having these conversations, and it's been like really weird and quiet and whatever and kind of awkward because we're still trying to get back into the groove of like, okay, where are we and who are we? We've been going nonstop. And so just 2 days ago, when I'm driving him to work, he's like ranting about all things, like kind of midlife crisis kind of ranting about what is life, all of this that we do, what's the purpose of it. And he feels like he's pulled all these different directions. His work is so stressful and all of this, like, is it even worth anything? And then he's like, we're getting up to work at that point and I'm fixing to drop him off. And he's like, well, I'm sorry you had to hear me rant. And at first I went on the whole ride there as he's complaining about these things. I'm going on and asking questions like, well, would you feel that way if we were on a mission trip? Would you? Because, you know, people are needing help post-hurricane and he has these skill sets that people need, but it's a pressure added onto his day-to-day life. And he just wants to be able to rest and all of these things. And so I'm kind of like planting these little seeds of guilt in him the whole way there as I'm asking these questions. And then it just like hit me, this book study that we're doing. And I was just like, oh, I am not like making him feel better about himself right now. I am making him feel worse about himself. So I like drove home from that and I'm like, God, I need you to help me to be more encouraging, to lift him up more, like, what should I have done? What could I have said? So I just took some time right then to text him and be like, hey, I just want you to know that I think you're freaking amazing. Like, you do so much that you don't realize that is so appreciated. That's why people call on you, and because you're so skilled in these areas. And there's nobody else that I'd rather hear ranting at 7 a.m. than you. Like, that's what we're here for, right? We are here to be able to like be completely open and honest with each other. And so just as you were talking, it was bringing up all of those reminders of this place, this gift that we have as our spouse's wife, to really speak life and encourage them, or to pick apart those negative things that make them who they are. And we get to choose. And how long we do that, one way or the other, is what determines at the end of it if we're going to still be married at the end of this, or if we're going to be reaping the benefits of a happy marriage 10 years, 20 years, 50 years down the road. Man. Whew, that was making me a little bit emotional.
No, I get it. And can I just add, there's a part in the book that I laughed out loud at. And this is probably another tip for women too, for wives, is to remember that you as a wife think so much differently than your husband thinks. Like, you guys are completely different in your biology, and he talks about that in the book. But there's a point in the book where he says, you know, a wife notices the light bulb isn't working. So she, you know, walks down to her husband and is like, hey, honey, the light bulb's out. And he took it as, oh, she's making an observation. And she took it as, I'm asking you to fix the light bulb. And I laughed so hard because that's so true. Like, women, I feel like most of us would agree, like, yeah, that was me asking you, telling you to go change the light bulb. My husband 100% would be like, oh, cool, I'm glad that you noticed that. And then wouldn't do anything. and Cameron has told me this. We've had this conversation so many times. He says, you have to be so specific. The other day I asked him to grab shoes for our son because he just had like slider sandals on and we were going to like a rodeo. And I was like, will you please just get him some good shoes to wear? So he meets me and he did grab shoes. Guess what he didn't grab? Socks. In my head, I'm like, socks and shoes, those go together. Like, you should just grab both of them. No, he just grabbed shoes. So you just have to remember that husbands' brains are just different than women's brains. And that has really helped me too, to be like, okay, I'm going to give him some grace. He has a man brain. He has man eyes. You know, women, you know, when he's trying to find something, he doesn't know where it is. You got to go find it from him. Same thing. He's got a man brain, and that's just how it is.
Yes. Oh man. And see, that's what, like, when you tell those stories, like, I'm the man. I don't like, I don't know why, like, my brain is so much like, I don't know. But so not even, I think most of the time it is like pretty typical that it's like how the man thinks and the woman thinks. But I know sometimes it's just like a personality thing too. So yes,
It is.
definitely, because I could see myself grabbing the shoes or being like, oh, cool, yeah, the light's out, and not ever
Yeah.
change the light bulb. Like, that doesn't mean anything to me. But like,
So
yeah.
maybe it's not a man thing. It's more of a personality thing. It probably is a personality thing for sure.
Yeah, but I do
just know
think
your
that it's
person.
typical. Yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay, so before we go, because there's a lot more that I, always, especially when I have you on, that I feel like we could uh talk about,
Talk
like, and keep
forever. I
going
know.
with this. Yes. And if we can get our crap together, maybe you can help me with the next chapter. So, guys, the time zone difference and mom life and grandma life over here and all the things, the two of us trying to get our schedules together has been a little bit comical. But I want you to tell them about your emails that you send out and how they can get on that list, because I think it's just one of those little, like, gifts that you send out to your community that when I get it in my inbox, it's just that reminder of being intentional in this area when it comes to my marriage.
Okay. Yeah, and thank you so much for saying that. That's such kind words. I am all about simple, and so I send you a date. It's not an affirmation. Oh my gosh, an abbreviation for DATE, and I'll send you a date idea, a appreciation little tidbit for your marriage, what you can do, a talk, which is like just one question you can ask your spouse for that week. And it's usually a question that will, hopefully lead you to more conversation and more questions that you can ask each other. And then E is for encouragement. And I love quotes. I love just encouraging little stories. And so I'll just put something in there that hopefully gives you a little bit of encouragement for your marriage. To number one, know you're not alone in the hardness of marriage. It's a hard thing, guys. It's a tough thing, but it's also such a beautiful thing and a blessing. And I want you to remember that you are a blessing to each other. And number two, that it's simple. It doesn't have to take a lot of your time. I think a lot of us try to make it more complicated than it needs to be. Want to be there to help you remember that any effort you give, even if it's small, it will turn around into something big.
Yes.
And, sorry, where to get it? You can get them on my email list. It's just D8, the number 8, crates@gmail. I haven't changed it yet. You can either email me or just jump on my Instagram, make it a date _ and shoot me a DM and I'll add you ASAP.
Okay, yes. And that's where Jamie spends most of her time, is on Instagram. At least as far as I know, that's where you and I have connected the most, on there. So go on there, start following her, because she's going to be sharing these just ideas randomly, or just life stuff. And sometimes she talks about the sex side of it, all the different things that come in with marriage and the complications that come along with marriage, and helping you be intentional in these things. So she's giving you some very good, just like very practical things today about being appreciative and actually like speaking that to them and looking for those good things. So go out and start doing that now. Like, look for something right now, like pause this, and text your husband or your wife, if you're a man listening here, text them something that you appreciate about them. When they walk in the door today, be excited to see them. Have these conversations. Ask them simple questions on here. Even just like what Jamie asked Cameron, just saying like, hey, what do I do that makes you feel appreciated? Is such a huge thing right there. To hear from them, you would be amazed. I have asked Randall the same question, and you would be amazed at what they see as appreciation, where it's like we think, oh, we're just like, that's just us being us. Like we didn't even realize that was the thing. And we're over here trying to plan and do these all big grand gestures. And that's not it for them. It's these like little things. And I'm like, okay. So go and do that. Follow her on Instagram. And Jamie, I just appreciate you for taking the time to come on today. And if we can get it together and have more of these conversations here pretty soon, I'm going to change our view so that I can see you on here as well, not just myself. But to come together like this and to be able to share these valuable tips with our community, I just appreciate that, because I know as a mom of 3 running around crazy, you've got a lot going on.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I always love being here, so it's so great.
Yes, and then BFAM, we just appreciate you guys and showing up and putting the hard work into your marriage so that this is your last marriage, whether this be your first marriage or your 4th marriage. Let this be your last marriage. Let this be the one that you put in the work and the effort. And if you feel like you're the only one in your marriage putting the work and the effort, the book talks about this a lot. Like Jamie said as well, you start doing what you can. And when you begin to do these things and show these and make these small changes, eventually your spouse comes along too and begins to see things differently. We see that time and time and time again. So you're not alone. And if you're tired and you feel alone, just know that we're here for you as well. But find you a group of women that y'all can come together and you can begin to pray over your marriage and pray over your spouse. And when you're doing that, it's putting it beyond your own abilities and putting it into the one who brought you and your spouse together, and begin to see God working behind the scenes and trusting that he is doing something good inside your marriage. So I love you guys. And until next time, remember to enjoy your blended family. Bye.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope this episode has been a blessing and encouraged your family journey.
Make sure you stay connected with us and join our weekly Blended Family newsletter. We send an email out every Friday morning full of support and encouragement.
And when you join, we also want to give you a free gift. So go get yours today. The link is in the show notes below.
Have an amazing day. Remember to enjoy the journey with your blended family, and we'll see you on the next episode.